This review and the content it covers is intended for mature audiences and contains content of a harsh or sexual nature. Viewer discretion is advised. And there's no need to hide, this review is spoiler free. Have you ever been reading a fan service manga and thought to yourself, you know what would make this better? Big climactic showdowns with laser beam armpit hairs and ultimate techniques that summon the power of cliches to wage psychological war with the enemy. No? What am I on? Well, strap yourselves in because I'm about to tell you about a little known series by the name of Goudere Sora Nagihara. It was cancelled after 23 chapters, but does that mean it was too mediocre to run? Or do we have a hidden gem on our hands? Shota Yamakawa is a high schooler with a passion for all things 2D. He feels drawn in by one particular character from his favourite manga, t-sensei. Her name is Sora Nagihara, and one day, while he's reading the manga, Sora herself unexpectedly emerges from the pages of the book and appears before him. Joy quickly turns to disappointment as Shota realises that the Sora in front of him is nothing like the cute and demure Sora from t-sensei. In fact, she declares it her mission to create Shota's own harem of sex slaves and unwillingly leads him and his manhood on a quest for domination of the opposite sex. The story of this series follows the now day-to-day life of Shota and the various shenanigans that Sora drags him into. The plot doesn't follow a story thread as such because each chapter is its own self-contained narrative. Every time a chapter ends, that's the end of that story, and when a new one begins, Sora's antics start anew. Besides a few two-parters as it were, you could easily pick this series up at any point, although there's no reason for English-speaking readers to do that because we've got bound volumes to work with. I think the blank of the week format works well with this series, because every chapter you go in thinking, what's this chapter going to be about? It pokes all kinds of fun at the manga industry, from the tired cliches to the lives and thought processes of the creators. It doesn't rinse and repeat any formula either. It deals with cliches by deconstructing them and applying all sorts of abstract rules to them that shouldn't exist in real life, and that's a part of where the comedy comes from. Just the sheer absurd lengths the cliches are taken to. A clear divide is made between fantasy and reality, and Sora has these 2D techniques that tear down that barrier and force manga cliches to apply to people in real life. And this defeats them. I want to say that the story doesn't take itself too seriously, but in a way it does. I suppose what I should say is that the characters take the story more seriously than it takes itself. What start out as minute issues quickly turn into dramatic showdowns, where characters are fighting for ridiculous reasons that they place so much importance on. It's difficult to explain with words, but needless to say, the results are hilarious to watch. The only thing I can really complain about is the abrupt ending. The final chapter makes it clear that this series was suddenly cancelled, and Suma Mizuki had to work the series into a satisfying conclusion in a single chapter. Now, I know you can't blame him for this. Even the great Hirohiko Araki would struggle to end a series as suddenly as that, but it has to be said that the last chapter is not as good as the rest of the series. It's just missing the fourth wall shattering hilarity that everything before it inspired. Not to mention how vague the ending itself is. I don't think that the ending is the be all and end all of whether a series is worth checking out, but anyone would prefer a series to be nicely wrapped up in the end, and this one is just not. Let's start with Shota, the protagonist. He's a short, reserved high schooler who doesn't want to cause trouble but can't stand by and watch a girl get hurt. A pretty bland and uninteresting protagonist, but since he's nothing more than our window into the story, I can cut him some slack. He has a job and he does it. Nothing more, nothing less. I mean, at least he isn't a massive virginal weirdo like some protagonists, and he isn't obnoxious either. It's genuinely nice to watch Shota's developing relationship with his warped waifu. He stays by her side no matter what, and the fact that he'd do that for someone who, for all intents and purposes, tarnishes his idea of the perfect companion is commendable. He's not afraid to man up and take responsibility for the things that Sora ends up doing, even though she might not deserve his kindness, because deep down he's a protective guy. Where Shota lacks in presence, Sora more than makes up for in personality. Let me explain. A Goudere is a character who, out of love, will do anything and everything to please their master. In this case, Sora guesses that Shota wants to impregnate as many women as possible, and so she goes on a non-stop pursuit for other girls that Shota can have sex with. Obviously this isn't what he wants, but that doesn't stop her from trying. Although she's the titular character, the truth is that she doesn't get much development compared to other characters. She doesn't come off as a complex character at all, and when she does start to show some signs of interesting development, it only comes at the end. I'll say it again, this series was ended abruptly, but that doesn't mean that issues like this can just be swept under the rug. It just means that it wasn't Minazuki's fault. although Sora's antics don't get any less entertaining, especially with the input of the supporting cast. This is where the series comes into its own element. Shota is there for the reader's benefit and Sora is there to start the shenanigans, but without the supporting cast there wouldn't be any meat to the series. I'm not going to talk about every single character, but there are some that are worth mention. Firstly, there's Nanado. He's a Fukuoka boxing coach with an absurd hatred for anything that doesn't have tiny boobs. Specifically, he fills a main villain role, usually getting into conflict with the man responsible for Tama's kiss, Takahiro Moroka, otherwise known as Segu equals t-sensei. I'm just gonna call him Takahiro, alright? Anyway, Takahiro and Nanado have an implied history and an unquenchable rivalry. Nanado's role as a villain is more than welcome, as are Takahiro's just bizarre mannerisms and facial expressions. Kaburagi is probably the worst character in the series. She's Shota's estranged childhood friend and in charge of the dorm where he lives. She does get some development, but it all comes off as bitchy and selfish. We're supposed to sympathise with her, but at the end of the day, it just doesn't happen. She's just not a sympathetic character. At no point in the series do you ever feel sorry for her. And while the personal conflicts of most of these characters are never exactly life or death, at the very least we do want to root for them. With Kaburagi, it's just not there because she's always put into confrontation with Shota or Sora. Tenka is another love interest for Shota who thankfully outshines Kaburagi. She's a Fukuoka boxing champion who ends up losing her position thanks to Sora's 2D techniques. Though she isn't an amazing character, she does work well when she's playing off of Sora's antics. It's her reactions that make her entertaining to watch. If I had to complain, I'd say that her personality completely changes by the end of the first volume, but not in a bad way. She starts out just as bitchy as Kaburagi is, but after a while she finds a comfortable role as a reactive character and a participant in the fresh insanity that's cooked up every chapter. She could have had more development, but again, cancelled. Although the award for best character in this series goes to Wakatsuki Oshino, who gets more development than anyone else. She's a whiz kid who distances herself from others, but ends up getting pulled into Shota's entourage regardless. I won't spoil her character arc, but it is where this series reaches its pinnacle, and it only makes me more disappointed that it was cancelled. Wakatsuki shows more than anything that this series had potential to be something more than just a balls to the walls batshit crazy comedy. There is an important moral about the pressure of other people's expectations woven through her story, and seeing the outcome of that character arc is truly heartwarming. If words weren't enough to drive home how strange this series really is, then the artwork will do the job. At its most tame, the characters are really expressive, and at its most bizarre, the use of surreal imagery and innuendo gives the series its own identity. Sue Minazuki has a real talent for drawing faces especially. Some of Takahiro and Nanado's expressions are just priceless. The absurdity of the artwork is a huge part of what makes the series so funny. The slapstick humour is well realised and everything really feels alive and moving. In terms of the content of the artwork, it really isn't safe for public reading. This isn't a manga you can read on the train to work unless you love being stared at. It's full of double entendres, suggestive imagery and innuendo. Although the content isn't explicit, it sure as hell looks like it. The one flaw is that sometimes female characters can look indistinguishable from each other. It's not a huge problem, but it's a weakness for sure. Besides that, I can't really find fault with the artwork. It breathes life into the whole series. So at the end of the day, what can I say about Goudere Sora Nagihara? Well, it's a hilarious adult manga series so sadly cut short in its prime. Although it did have its flaws, if the series had kept going, it would have had the time to fill in those gaps. It seems obvious to me that Sue Minazuki wanted to continue the series as well, because at the end of the last chapter are the words Part 1, the end, implying that there's so much more he had in store. It really is a massive shame that it was cancelled, because there's nothing quite like it. There's nothing else quite as bizarre and still so unique and funny. It was even starting to develop its characters really well, but what can you do, I suppose. What we got was a truly great manga series that I would recommend to anyone over a certain age, and with any luck, maybe Sue Minazuki will find a publisher who's willing to pick the series up again. Until that day, all I can say is that it's not the best manga ever, but I'll be waiting with bated breath for its return. All 4 volumes of Goudere Sora Nagihara are available in English right now from Yen Press. Unfortunately for all you e-readers out there, it isn't available digitally, but picking up the physical copy shouldn't be too hard. For alternate recommendations, I'd point you to Sundome, another relatively short manga series with a lot of mature sexual subject matter. Although the artwork is hideous, I've found a small place in my heart for it. Or, if you're looking for something that's going to last you a while, then I'd recommend JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. As the name implies, it's a weird and wonderful series. It's only recently started enjoying global success, but it's been going since 1986 to the present day for a very good reason. Hopefully one of these will be to your liking. Remember to leave feedback in the comments, and until next time, cheerio.